Jonah Breck did not learn about the three orcs until the morning after the wedding. He learned about them at 6 in the morning, when he came down the stairs of the old farmhouse in his stockinged feet to start a fire in the kitchen stove, and he found his new wife standing at the cellar door with a tray of bread and eggs and a small clay jar of milk, and her face when she turned to see him was the face of a woman who had been planning how to tell him something for weeks, and had been hoping to put it off at least one more morning. Her name was Alma Corinne. She was 39 years old, 5 years older than Jonah, a tall woman with hair the color of dark honey, streaked with gray at the temples, sharp gray eyes, a strong jaw, and hands that had been worked hard for 2 decades. Her husband had been a man named Eben Corin, who had died of a fever the previous autumn at the age of 52, leaving Alma the deed to 180 acres of good bottom land along the Silver River and a farm she could not run alone. Jonah Breck was 34 years old, a man with no land and 2 good horses, and a trade as a wheelwright that had paid well enough until the small town where he had apprenticed had hired its own wheelwright the previous year, and left Jonah with work that was drying up fast. He had brown hair cut short, brown eyes, a short brown beard, and the wide shoulders of a man who had spent 15 years lifting wagon wheels. He had known Alma for 6 months. He had begun courting her in the quiet way the frontier courted, which was to say he had stopped by her farm with small repairs that she had not quite asked for but had clearly needed, and she had fed him lunch when the repairs were done, and the lunches had gotten longer, and the repairs had gotten smaller, and eventually they had sat on her porch one Sunday afternoon, and Jonah had said, "I have no land, but I am not afraid of work, and you have land, but cannot do all the work alone, and I think we suit each other more than most people who marry do." And Alma had thought about this for a full minute, and then said, "I think that is probably true." They had married in the village church the next month. The wedding had been small. They had come back to the farm the same evening, and Alma had cooked a simple supper, and they had gone to bed and woken up as husband and wife in a bed that had been Eben Corinne's for 31 years and was now theirs. That had been the night before. This was the morning after. Jonah stopped on the bottom step and looked at his wife and at the tray and at the open cellar door. Alma did not move. She did not put down the tray. She did not try to close the door. She simply looked at him with the particular expression of a person who had just decided in the space of 3 seconds that she was going to tell the whole truth and accept the consequences. "Jonah, there are 3 people living in the cellar." Jonah was a slow thinker in the mornings. He was a slow thinker in general. He had learned a long time ago that his slow thinking was usually an asset, because it kept him from saying things he would regret. But it was also sometimes a handicap, because it meant that in the first seconds after a piece of unexpected information arrived, he simply stood there looking like a man who had not yet processed the information. He stood there looking like that now. 3 people. Yes. In our cellar? Yes. Who? Orcs. Jonah blinked. He looked at the tray. He looked at the cellar door. He looked at his wife's face. How long? 4 years. Eben took them in during the bad winter of 78. They were running from a raid on their village. Eben gave them the cellar because he had a good heart beneath his many other qualities, and because the cellar is large and warm and has its own small chimney that vents out the back wall. They stayed. We intended for them to leave in spring, but spring came and they had nowhere to go. And then summer came and we had gotten used to them, and then Eben died, and I have been bringing them meals for 6 months because I did not know what else to do, and I did not want to turn them out, and I did not know how to tell you before we were married, because I was afraid you would not marry me if you knew." She paused. "I am telling you now because I decided last night, when you were asleep, that I had married a man and not a fool, and that a man deserved to know what was in his own cellar on the first morning of his marriage, and that if my marrying you meant the 3 people downstairs had to leave, then I would accept that, but I would not lie to you one more day." Jonah stood on the bottom step. He looked at the tray. The eggs on the tray were warm. The bread looked freshly baked. The milk in the small clay jar had been warmed on the stove. It was the breakfast of people who were being cared for. "Who are they?" Alma took a breath. "A man, a woman, and the woman's sister. The man is named Varga. The woman is named Seva. The sister is named Dole. They are not young, but they are not old. Middle years. They were farmers before the raid. They have been repairing things around the cellar and making small items they give me to sell at market. They keep themselves clean. They ask for nothing except food. They do not speak much. Why have you not moved them to the barn?" Alma looked at him carefully. "Because the cellar cannot be seen from the road. The barn can. And because there is a man named Brannock Hale in the village who is the territorial constable, and Brannock Hale has said publicly on 3 occasions that he believes there are Orcs hidden in the valley, and that he intends to find them, and a family of 3 Orcs in a barn is a family of 3 Orcs anyone can stumble across. A family of 3 Orcs in a root cellar, behind a false wall, behind a stack of apple barrels, is a family of 3 Orcs no one has found in 4 years and will not find unless I tell them where to look." Jonah thought about this. He looked at the tray again. The false wall. Eben built it. He was a carpenter before he was a farmer. The cellar is the size of a small room, and he took a section of it at the back, maybe 8 feet by 10, and he walled it off with a panel that matches the rest of the cellar stone. There is a hidden catch you have to know to find. The apple barrels stand in front of it. To anyone who goes down into the cellar, it looks like a normal cellar full of apples and turnips and smoked meat. And the 3 who live back there have been living in a space 8 by 10 feet for 4 years. Yes. Jonah sat down on the bottom step. He put his hands on his knees. He was processing. Alma let him process. She did not put the tray down, but she also did not interrupt him. After perhaps a minute, Jonah spoke. "Eben was a better man than I thought." Alma's face did something complicated. "He was many things. Better than you thought is one of them. Worse than you thought is also one of them. That is how men usually are." "Yes." Jonah stood up. He walked to the tray. He looked at it. He looked at Alma. "I am not going to turn them out. I married a woman who saved 3 lives during a bad winter 4 years ago, and did not stop saving them when it became inconvenient. I am not going to be the man who made her stop. What I'm going to do is go down into that cellar with you and meet these 3 people, because if they are going to live in my house, they should know who's walking around above their heads, and they should have the chance to tell me to my face what kind of life I am inheriting." Alma looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. She handed him the tray. They went down the cellar stairs together. The cellar was large and dim. Barrels of apples lined the walls. Smoked hams hung from hooks in the ceiling. Jars of preserved vegetables sat on shelves. Jonah could see, now that he was looking, that there was a section of the back wall where the stone was slightly different in pattern from the rest, though he would not have noticed if he had not been told. Alma walked to the stack of apple barrels at the back wall. She pulled a small wooden peg from a gap between the stones at shoulder height. She pushed on a specific spot on the wall. The stone panel swung inward on a hidden hinge. The space behind the panel was smaller than Jonah had imagined, but better kept. It was lit by a small oil lamp set in a niche. There was a narrow straw mattress on a wooden frame against one wall, with a second mattress rolled up on top of a wooden chest beside it. There was a small table with 3 wooden stools. There was a basin and a pitcher of water. There was a neat stack of clean clothing folded on a shelf. The walls were hung with 2 small embroidered cloths and a wooden carving of a tree. 3 orcs sat at the small table. They stood up when the door opened. The oldest-looking of the 3 was a tall, broad-shouldered man with bright, deep green skin, close-cropped gray and black hair, a thick gray beard, dark eyes that were alert but unafraid, prosthetic-like large pointed ears, and a white scar running across his left cheekbone. He wore a plain, long-sleeved gray linen shirt over dark wool trousers with leather shoes. This was Varga. Beside him stood a woman of perhaps his own age, also tall, with bright, deep green skin and long black hair gone gray in streaks, pulled back in a single braid with a strip of red cloth at the end. She had a strong, kind face with high cheekbones, dark eyes, small lower tusks just visible, and large pointed ears. She wore a long, dark green wool dress that covered her from neck to ankles, cinched at the waist with a woven belt. This was Seva. Beside Seva stood a slightly younger woman who was clearly her sister, shorter and rounder, with bright green skin, black hair in 2 braids tied with leather cords, soft features, large pointed ears, and the cautious expression of a person who had learned to let the older people speak first. She wore a long gray linen dress. This was Dole. The 3 of them looked at Jonah. Jonah looked at the 3 of them. Alma spoke first. Jonah, this is Varga, Seva, Dole. They have been in this house for 4 years. Jonah is my husband. I have told him everything. Varga looked at Jonah for a long moment. He spoke in careful, common speech. You know about us now. I know. What will you do? Nothing. You will stay in this cellar for as long as you need to stay. My name is Jonah Breck. I am a wheelwright by trade. I do not know much about orcs. I know even less about people who have lived in a cellar for 4 years. I will try to learn both. If there's anything I can do to make your life better, I will do it. If there's anything you know about farms that could help ours, I would be glad to hear it. That is what I can offer you this morning. Varga looked at Seva. Seva looked back at him. Something passed between them that Jonah did not see but understood anyway. Varga nodded slowly. We are glad to meet you, Jonah Breck. Seva spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and warm. Your wife has been kind to us. Eben was kind to us. You are kind to us. It is the kindness of one family that has kept us alive. We will not forget. Dole did not speak. She watched Jonah, but after a moment she held out her hand, which was the gesture Alma had taught her meant greeting in human custom, and Jonah took it, and they shook. Alma set the tray on the table. The 3 orcs sat down. Jonah and Alma left the hidden room and climbed back up the cellar stairs. They did not speak until they were in the kitchen. Alma put the kettle on. Jonah? Yes. Are you angry? I am surprised. I am not angry. I have been married to you for one night. Already I know more about you than I knew yesterday afternoon. I suspect this is how marriages work. Alma laughed. It was the first time Jonah had heard her laugh since the wedding, and only the third time he had ever heard her laugh. She laughed the way she did everything, plainly, without performance. I was afraid of this moment for 3 weeks. I know. I am glad it is over. I am glad, too. Now tell me about Brannock Hale. Alma told him about Brannock Hale. Brannock Hale was a man of 58 who had been the territorial constable for 11 years. He was not stupid. He was not cruel. He was the particular kind of dangerous man who believed deeply in the proper order of things and whose sense of proper order was small and rigid and did not include orcs living in root cellars. He had been chasing rumors of hidden orcs in the Silver River Valley for 3 years. He had come by the farm twice in the last year and asked Alma specific questions that she had answered with specific lies. He had not caught her in any of the lies, but he had watched her face carefully while she told them, and Alma suspected he believed she was lying, but did not yet have the proof. He would come back. Sooner or later, he would come back with more than questions. Jonah listened. When she was done, he said, "Then we need to think about what happens when he comes back. I have been thinking about it for a year, and I do not have a good answer yet. I have had time, but not help. You are help. Then we will think about it together." They began to think about it. They thought about it while they worked the farm through the first month of the marriage. They thought about it while Jonah learned the rhythms of 180 acres, which was 3 times the land he had ever worked, and while Alma learned to work beside another adult again after 6 months of working alone. They thought about it while Jonah learned to bring the tray down to the cellar in the morning, when Alma was busy with the chickens, and while he learned the small knocks on the hidden panel that meant, "I am coming in, and do not worry." They thought about it while he learned that Varga had been a carpenter before he had been a farmer, before he had been a refugee, and that the small wooden items Alma sold at market had been carved by Varga by the light of the oil lamp in the hidden room. They thought about it while he learned that Seva could read and write in 2 languages and had been teaching Alma to read in the Orc tongue during the long winter evenings for 3 years. They thought about it while he learned that Dole made the finest embroidery he had ever seen, that the small embroidered cloths hanging on the cellar walls were samples of her work, and that Alma had been selling Dole's embroidery in town as her own because the village did not buy goods from orcs. On the morning of the 2nd month, Jonah had an idea. He did not tell Alma immediately. He thought about it for a week. Then he told her, "I am going to build them a house." Alma looked at him. "Where?" "In the back section of the barn, the loft above the grain storage. There is enough space up there for 3 people to live properly, real beds, a window at the back that faces the woods and cannot be seen from the road, a small stove for heat, a privy chute. It will take me 2 months to build if I work on it in the evenings. The barn can be seen from the road. The loft cannot. I have studied it. The back of the loft is blind to the road. There is no angle from the road where anyone can see the back window of the loft. If Hale comes to search the barn, he will see the grain storage below. If he climbs the ladder to the loft, he will see what looks like a storage loft with some old furniture in it. The living space will be behind a partition wall with a concealed door. The same principle as the cellar, but bigger and above ground, where there is light and air, and where 3 people who have been in a basement for 4 years can finally see the sky from a window of their own. Alma thought about this. Jonah, yes. If Hale comes looking seriously and climbs the ladder, even a good partition will not hold. I know. That is why the loft is the second part of the plan. The first part is that Hale has to stop looking. How do we make Hale stop looking? That is where Varga comes in, and the magistrate in the coastal town of Breadwater, and a wheel I am going to build for the magistrate's carriage that will be the best wheel in the territory. Alma looked at him. You are not a slow thinker after all. I am a slow thinker. It just took me a month of being married to you before I started thinking about the right problem. It took Jonah 3 months, not 2. He built the loft dwelling while also repairing the magistrate's old carriage, which he had taken in for the job after riding to Breadwater on a Saturday and introducing himself to the magistrate's steward. The magistrate was a woman named Petra Vance, who was known throughout the territory for 2 things. The first was that she ran her magistracy more honestly than most. The second was that she had, 5 years ago, ruled in favor of an Orc trader in a dispute with a human merchant over a disputed shipment, and had been the only magistrate in the territory to do so, and had not lost her post despite 3 separate petitions for her removal. Jonah did not mention Orcs to Petra Vance. He fixed her carriage. He did the best work he had done in his life. The wheel he rebuilt for her was, he said later to Alma, the best wheel he would ever build, because he understood while he was building it that what he was really building was a favor he would need to call in, and that the favor had to be earned before it was asked. When the carriage was done, Petra Vance came out personally to inspect it. She rode in it through the streets of Breadwater for an hour. She came back and paid Jonah in full plus 20 extra silvers, and she said, I have not ridden in a carriage that rolled this smoothly in 10 years. If you need anything from me in the future, Mr. Breck, you may ask. Jonah bowed his head. He said, Thank you, magistrate. He rode home. 2 weeks later, Brannock Hale came to the farm. He came in the late morning with 2 deputies. He came with a written search warrant issued by a justice of the peace in a neighboring village, which was the kind of warrant that Hale had been unable to obtain from Petra Vance for 3 years and had finally obtained from a different judge through some combination of persistence and paperwork. The warrant authorized a full search of the house, the barn, and all outbuildings. Hale was polite. He always was. He presented the warrant. He asked Alma and Jonah to step out of the house while the search was conducted. Jonah and Alma stepped out onto the porch. They watched. The search took 3 hours. The deputies were thorough. They checked the house. They checked the barn. They checked the outbuildings. They found nothing. They did not find the cellar hideout because Varga, Siva, and Dole were no longer in the cellar. They had moved to the loft dwelling 3 days earlier on the evening Jonah had completed the partition wall, at a moment when the road was empty and the move could be made in full daylight. They did not find the loft dwelling because the loft dwelling was designed not to be found, and because the deputies climbed the ladder and saw what looked like a storage loft with some old furniture in it and did not look for concealed doors. Brannock Hale himself searched the cellar. He spent a long time at the stack of apple barrels. He moved them. He tapped the wall. He tapped it carefully. The stone of the false wall responded with a slightly different sound than the true stone, a sound a carpenter like Eben had known about when he built the wall, and which was the reason Eben had also constructed a second false chamber on the opposite wall that was empty and unremarkable, and which Hale also tapped and did not discover. Hale stood in the cellar for a long time. He knew he could not prove it. Alma had lived with this possibility for 3 years. Jonah had lived with it for 4 months. Hale climbed out of the cellar and walked back to the porch and handed Jonah the warrant and said, "Nothing here, Mr. Breck. Thank you for your patience." Jonah said, "Any time, Constable." Hale rode away with his deputies. Alma and Jonah stood on the porch until the dust settled. Then Alma said, "Jonah." "Yes." "He knows. I know he knows. He will come back. Probably not with a warrant." "No, probably not." Jonah looked at her. "Then we go to Petra Vance. I said I might ask a favor someday. Someday is come." Jonah rode to Breadwater the next week. He met with Petra Vance. He told her, in careful, indirect language that did not technically name anyone or anything, that he was worried about the tendency of certain constables to harass landowners in the Silver River Valley on the basis of unproven accusations, and that he had heard of a particular constable named Hale who seemed to be making it his personal project to find and remove certain residents of the valley, regardless of whether any law had been broken. Petra Vance listened. She was a woman of perhaps 60, with gray hair pinned up, a plain face, and sharp, attentive eyes. When Jonah finished speaking, she looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Breck, I am going to tell you something, and I am going to ask you not to repeat it. Brannock Hale has been under review by my office for 14 months. The review is discreet because any public review alerts the reviewed. I have been waiting for the right moment to conclude it. I think the moment has arrived. Go home. You will not hear from Constable Hale again. He will be offered an early retirement to a small village where his particular enthusiasms will have less scope for expression, and he will take the offer because his pension depends on it." Jonah nodded slowly. "Magistrate Vance?" "Yes, Mr. Breck." "Thank you. I am not doing you a favor. Mr. Breck, I am doing my job. I have been doing my job at my own pace for 11 years. Your wheel did not make me do my job. Your wheel simply made me think about certain things at a particular time. I would have arrived at the same conclusion eventually. Good afternoon." "Good afternoon, Magistrate." Jonah rode home. 2 months later, Brannock Hale retired. He moved to a small village 2 days' ride to the east. He did not come back to the Silver River Valley. The new constable, a man named Cohen Ferris, was a younger man who did not share his predecessor's interest and who understood his job as keeping the peace rather than enforcing hierarchies. Varga, Seva, and Dole lived in the loft for the next 2 years. At the end of the second year, when word came that a large Orc settlement had been established in the free territories to the north, Varga and Seva and Dole decided to make the journey. Jonah drove them in the covered wagon over 3 weeks. Alma rode with them for the first week and turned back at the border because the farm needed her. When Jonah returned alone to the farm 3 weeks later, he found Alma sitting on the porch, drinking tea. She looked up. They arrived. They arrived. Settlement is good. Many Orcs already. Varga has family there he did not know were alive. Seva cried for an hour when she met them. Alma nodded. She handed Jonah a cup of tea. He sat beside her. They watched the Silver River move slowly past the bottom of the lower pasture in the late afternoon light. After a long while, Alma spoke. Jonah, yes, I have not thanked you. You have not needed to. I am thanking you anyway. She leaned her shoulder against his. He did not move away. The first winter, after Varga, Seva, and Dole had gone north to the settlement in the free territories, Jonah and Alma took stock of what had changed in their lives. The farm was quieter. The cellar was just a cellar again, with apples and turnips and smoked meat, and nothing behind the wall that Eben had built except the empty stone chamber and the memory of 4 years of small sounds that had been part of the daily music of the house. The loft above the grain storage was just a storage loft again, with the partition wall taken down and the small stove removed and the window shuttered for winter. But something had stayed. Alma received a letter in the spring from Seva. The letter had come down a long chain of travelers, passed from hand to hand for 7 weeks, because Orcs in the free territories had developed their own informal post that ran along trade routes. The letter was short, written in careful common. The settlement is green. The children have a school. Varga carves for the whole clan now. Dole sold 3 embroidered blankets at the market on the 2nd day of autumn. I am well. We think of you both every day. Come when you can. Seva. Alma read the letter 3 times. She wrote back. She sent her reply up the same informal chain. She did not know when or if it would arrive, but it did. The letters became yearly, then twice yearly. Sometimes Seva wrote, sometimes Varga, sometimes Dole, whose handwriting was careful and beautiful in the way of people who had learned to write slowly. The second winter, after they had gone north, the new constable Cohen Ferris stopped by the farm on a Sunday afternoon to introduce himself formally to the couple he had heard much about. He was a tall, thin man in his early 40s with a calm voice and honest eyes. He drank tea with Jonah and Alma on the porch. He did not ask about root cellars. He did not tap walls. He asked about the harvest and the weather and the repair of the main road. When he left, Jonah said to Alma, "That is a man who came by to say hello and not to look for anyone." "Yes, that is different." "It is." 2 springs after the letters had begun, Jonah and Alma made the journey north themselves. They left the farm in the care of a young married couple from the village who needed a home for 2 weeks in exchange for tending the animals. They took the covered wagon Jonah had driven north 3 years earlier. The road was easier now because trade had been growing along it, and the border crossing into the free territories was a casual affair, involving a small fee and a careful but not suspicious examination of their papers. The settlement, when they arrived, was larger than Jonah had expected. There were perhaps 400 Orcs living in it now. Wooden houses with stone foundations, a school, a trading post, a smithy. The place had grown in 3 years from the rough collection of buildings Jonah had left them at. Varga met them at the edge of the settlement. He had gained weight and lost the gray in his beard. Seva was standing in the doorway of a small, neat house with a green door And when she saw Alma, she walked 3 steps forward, stopped, and burst into tears for the second time in Alma's memory of her. Dole came out behind Seva, carrying a small green-skinned child, perhaps a year old, who was Dole's daughter, and whose name was Alma. They stayed for 6 days. The settlement fed them and housed them and walked them through every building that had been built in the 3 years since the Orcs had arrived. Varga showed Jonah the carvings he had been making, which had grown in ambition and skill as the workshop he now owned had grown around him. Seva showed Alma the small house with the green door, which Seva had built herself with help from 2 neighbors. Dole showed Jonah the market stall where her embroidered work sold to traders from as far as the coast, and where she had become, in the Orc language, a person of some reputation, which Jonah did not entirely understand the specifics of, but which the other Orcs treated her for when they walked through the market. On the 6th morning, Jonah and Alma got back in the wagon to ride south. The 3 Orcs stood in the road to see them off. Varga spoke. "You will come again." "We will come again." "Bring news." "We will." Seva handed Alma a small cloth-wrapped package. "For the next time you marry someone without telling them something important." Alma laughed. She opened the package on the road an hour later. It was a small embroidered handkerchief by Dole in green and gold thread, with a design of 3 small figures standing at a door. Alma kept it for the rest of her life. The lesson was not in the morning. Alma stood at the cellar door with the tray in her hands and decided to tell the truth. It was not in the loft Jonah built over the grain storage or the wheel he built for a magistrate in a town 2 days' ride away. It was in a slow thinker who had been married for 1 night and had decided that a man who had inherited a household inherited the people in it. It was in 3 Orcs who had lived 4 years in a space 8 feet by 10 and had not broken. It was in the understanding that the size of a household is not the size of the people you knew when you started. It is the size of the people you find yourself responsible for when the morning comes and the truth stands at the cellar door with a tray of breakfast for the ones you did not know you were marrying but had married anyway. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much. The Orc Keeper